Welcome to the Sober Circle channel.
Boy, this inventory and meditation, this nightly review and in the morning setting myself on the right track for my day. I was sitting here feeling embarrassed and ashamed that Don was 14 years sober when he was able to consistently do a nighttime review. I'm hoping that it'll be 22 for me. I have hope for next year. That I'm really good at nightly review when I'm in the middle of a tough spot. I've been in the middle of a tough spot. I've alluded to it a couple of times this weekend for about a year. Some business stuff that has been very difficult for me. And so currently, I am really good at this stuff. I've been driven to it by discomfort and by fear and by some difficult stuff that's going on in my life. I don't know if this time next year, if things work themselves out the way that I hope they're going to work themselves out, I don't know if I'll be able to consistently keep doing what I'm doing. And I just want to be honest with you guys and give you full disclosure. There are many times in my life where my evening review is not formal and it kind of goes like this. Yeah, I feel pretty good. I'm not even checking my own behavior. I'll sit down in the chair and I'll go, pretty good day today. We're good. We're good. I am driven into my evening review the same way that Step 6 drives me back to God. I sit down in my chair at night, and if some days I eat the bear and some days the bear eats me, and if the bear's been eating me today and I'm screwed up, at least I'm well enough trained in Alcoholics Anonymous to where it used to be I would sit down in my chair and this is how my thoughts would go. God, that guy's an idiot. I hate him. He's been really mean to me. She's really out of line. That one's really a piece of garbage. This better work out the way I think it should work out because this just isn't fair and I hate my life. And now, thankfully, I'm trained in AA to where I sit down after a bad day and I go, okay, what could I have done different here? That was bad behavior there. I did pretty good considering in that aspect, but I wish I would have done that differently. That guy's out of line, but you know what? If I was afraid like he's afraid, like I was afraid last week when I did something similar, I'd probably behave the way that he behaved. And I try to look at what has happened to me over the time in Alcoholics Anonymous is I've learned that what it says in the 12 and 12, and I actually think it says this in Step 10, not in Step 11, but it says anytime we are disturbed, it's a spiritual axiom. Anytime we are disturbed, there is something wrong with us. And I am grateful that I've been trained in Alcoholics Anonymous, that when my head's on fire, that I don't feed into that. Right, the book says in Step 11, it talks about, after the stuff that Don was talking about, bottom 87, it says, we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful. We ask for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves that we're no longer running the show. Humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will be done. And I'm grateful for the training I've had in Alcoholics Anonymous, that I know that anytime I'm screwed up, that I'm able to look for the selfishness, the dishonesty, the self-centered fear, and ask God to bring me back to that. My morning meditation has changed over the years. And I will tell you how my morning meditation began. I was about 11 years sober. And there's a guy that was 1 year sober. Good guy, good member of AA. In fact, at the time I didn't sponsor him. Today I happen to sponsor this guy. And he was sharing in a meeting about how he'd started doing meditation in the morning, and I wasn't doing much meditation in the morning. And he said that what he was doing is that he would set a timer and he would do 1 minute of quiet time in the morning thinking about God on a timer. And he was really proud of himself. He tried to do more than a minute, but his head ran. He was able to do 1 minute, and he did that consistently every morning. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to let a guy with 1 year's sobriety outdo me. So I started doing 2 minutes. Yeah, baby. couple months later in the meeting, he starts saying how he's doing 3 minutes. Well, I am now doing competitive meditation. So I bumped it to 5. Oh yeah, all the way to 5, baby. I'm pretty consistent with my morning meditation. I'm blessed. I have 2 guys, one guy that I sponsor and another guy that I don't, that is a good friend of mine, that when we do our meditation, when we're done, we send each other a text. And all the text says is done, 1 word. Sometimes it gets a little bit more wordy than that, but typically just 1 word, done. And I tell you, I'm funny because sometimes I'll get up and go about my day, and I will intend on meditating, and I'm going to meditate, but it just doesn't happen. And I'll get to work, it'll be 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'll get a text. Done. Uh-oh. I'm in my back private office in the building, right? Guys, I need 20 minutes. I'll be right back. 15 minutes later, done. Which is a great trick, and I know several people that do this. If you're in a spot where you're struggling to remember to take some time with God in the morning, get a meditation buddy. Someone that you text them and they text you when the meditation has been completed. It's really been effective in my life. I've had the same meditation partner now for 3 years, and it's been a real blessing for me. My meditation in the morning changes a lot. Like Don said, if it becomes a chant, if it becomes something that's rote, it stops being communication with God. So earlier in sobriety, I would do a 3rd step prayer every morning. And the problem with that is after a while, the 3rd step prayer becomes just something that I'm chanting. I'm not thinking about the words. I love when Don was talking about step 3, which says the wording, of course, was quite optional. So I do all kinds of different things in all kinds of different ways. But I always start out with this moment of asking God to direct my thinking. It's funny how the way the book is written, it talks about what we do at night, and then it talks about what we do in the morning. And I've read a lot of different spiritual books, and one of my favorite spiritual teachers, the Dalai Lama, in one of his books was talking about his personal spiritual life. And what he likes to do in the morning is he likes to ask the power that is in the universe, he likes to ask his connection with God to let him have a good day. Just let me have a good day. Let me treat people with kindness and respect and love. And then at the end of the day, he asks himself how he did. How did we do with our goal? And when you look at it that way, to me, the meditation, the morning and the evening review, make more sense. Right? It makes more sense that what I'm really doing is in the morning, I'm setting a track. In the morning, I'm asking God to help me behave a certain way. And at night, I'm just checking back in with God and saying, so how'd I do today? It almost makes me wonder why Bill didn't kind of write it that way. In the morning, here's how you start your day, and at the end, here's how you end your day. And I wondered that for a while. And then I was given a sponsee direction on how to do this. And I realized that unless you wake up with your sponsees, which is not good, probably you're going to see them sometime before they retire, and then, right, so you'll want them to do both things. And so I set my guys up that way. I had an experience with my wife that really drew all of this together for me. Because if my goal is for me to have conscious contact with God, and what does that mean? What does conscious contact with God mean? That I'm aware that God exists, that he's in the front of my mind, that he's part of my thinking, that as I go through my day, I am aware of this power in the universe, and I'm trying to do whatever I can to serve that power, that it's on my mind. And if I'm trying to do that, if I'm trying to have this relationship with God, then what does really this meditation and self-inventory and all this stuff have to do with each other? Bill says in the 12 and 12, he talks about the benefit of when inventory and meditation are wound together. He says something along the lines of prayer is magical and wonderful, meditation is really, really good, inventory has a lot of benefit. But when these things are woven together in the way that naturally they should be woven together, they create an unshakable foundation. So I'm at home one day with my wife and we're hanging out, and I get this friend, his name's Corey. I've known Corey since I was 16 years old. He's my longest friend that I've had. He's the guy that when I moved to Vegas to be his roommate. Since he's moved away and he's back in California now. And he had a job where from time to time he would come to Las Vegas. But he started out, he would tell us he was coming, but then business sometimes gets in the way and we wouldn't always see him and he felt bad. So he stopped giving us any advance notice. He would just call us when he was in Vegas if he had any time. He'd go, hey, I'm right around the corner from your place. Can I stop by and visit? Which is very cool for me. This guy's like my brother. My wife loves this guy. He was a groomsman at our wedding. He lived with us for a couple of 3 months when he was going through a tough time. He's a real member of the family. She adores this guy. He's been married twice. She planned both his weddings. I told him, if you get married a third time, maybe she's the jinx. Get somebody else to plan the wedding. But what I'm trying to say is he's a real member of the family. He's closer to us than blood. So he calls and he says he's coming by the house. I'm excited. I hang up the phone. I go, hey, babe, guess what? Corey's coming over. Well, she doesn't have the reaction I expect. I expect to go, oh, that's great. We'll tell stories. It'll be beautiful. I'm so, haven't seen. She freaks out. She goes, hurry up. Help me clean the house. I go, clean the house? Did you hear me say it was Corey that was coming? Not Prince Corey, right? Corey's coming. He don't care if the house is clean. She says, I don't care. Get up, help me clean. She starts doing dishes. She's yelling at me to fold blankets. I'm like, I lose my mind. I go, you have completely lost your mind. Corey does not care if the house is a mess. Who are you trying to impress? Knock it off. And she looks at me and she goes, you don't understand, do you? I know Corey doesn't care if the house is a mess. He wouldn't care if there was shit everywhere. I know. But if the house is a mess and he's here, I won't be able to relax. I will feel uncomfortable. I know it's silly, but I won't enjoy him. And as she's saying this, I'm thinking, that's what it's like with God. See, the bad news is, for most of us in AA, that there is absolutely nothing you can do. Nothing. You can't pray right. You can't live right. You can't eat the right food, go to the right church, sing the right songs, wear the right clothes, have the right knickknacks or the right jewelry. There is absolutely nothing you can do. Nothing you can do that will make God love you anymore. It's impossible. He don't love you any more than he does the guy in prison. Can't do it. Not possible. God just loves. Nothing you can do. I know it's bad news because we're all trying to make God love us more than the guy sitting next to us, but you can't do it. God just loves you. Nothing you can do. Nothing you can do. Here's the good news for a guy like me. That might be bad news for you spiritual people in Alabama, but for people like me from Vegas, here's the really good news. There is nothing that I can do, and I have tried. There is nothing that I can do that will make God love me any less. There's no behavior I can make, no sins I can commit, no thoughts I can have. There is nothing I can do that will make God love me any less. God just loves me no matter what I do, because God loves me. And God just loves. That's all God does. So why all the effort? Because just like my wife with my friend Corey, when the house is a mess, I won't invite God in. Because I'm ashamed and I'm embarrassed. When the house is a mess, if God's there, even though he don't judge, I'll feel judged. When the house is a mess, when God's there, I won't relax and enjoy him. I'll feel uncomfortable and embarrassed and ashamed. I don't do the inventory because it'll impress God, because God don't care. He knows anyway. Guess what? He was there. He was watching you, kind of laughing. Thought you were kind of silly when you did that thing you did. Right? There goes Sheldon again, doing that stuff that Sheldon does. God don't care. God don't care at all, but I care. When I feel dirty and I feel ashamed or I feel embarrassed, I won't let God in and I won't turn to God. And if I don't turn to God and I'm not reaching for God, what's going to happen is eventually the insanity will return and I'll drink again. But I want to tell you something that is true for me and may not be true for you, but is true for me. I spend a lot of time in Alcoholics Anonymous trying to get a closer and more connected relationship with God. I spend a lot of time doing that. I'm far from perfect. I make a lot of mistakes. We've talked about this weekend. I am far from perfect, but I spend a lot of time trying to get connected to God. but I don't always feel it. And sometimes I think it's almost like heresy to admit it in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I think sometimes there are other people that need to hear my truth in case it's their truth. That sometimes it don't matter how much I pray, I don't seem to be able to feel connected. It don't matter what my behavior's been like. Sometimes I could have been behaving really well, and I still don't feel connected. And sometimes I could have been really quite a jerk, and I do feel connected. My spiritual condition seems to change. It seems to ebb and flow. I've had some of the most amazing spiritual experiences. I remember one time, I used to work 60 miles outside of town, and I would drive towards a mountain range that I had to go over before I got home. And I was driving towards the east, so as the sun went down behind me, and the colors would hit the mountain, right? And it would be beautiful purples and golds and reds. And sometimes I'd be driving towards that mountain, and I would be almost like I could see God on the hill, and it would make me cry driving up this road. Amazing, spectacular. One time, this feeling lasted so long, I got to my home group that Monday night, and the speaker was speaking. There was this little lady, it was Peg Martin. She stood there speaking, and there's a glow. I was getting a little freaked out, right? Like, whoa. I finally cracked completely. There's a glow behind her. And I felt so like I'd look at you and I could see God in you. And it was magical. And for absolutely no reason. At other times I'll walk through this universe and I won't be able to see him. I won't be able to feel him. And I tell you, for me, it's not a behavioral thing, because I have behaved well and I have behaved badly, and I've been connected on the good days and I've not been connected on the bad days, and vice versa. I was in Fort Lauderdale a few years ago with my wife. My wife lived out there, her mom's out there. We were on vacation. And we're at a beach, and I forget the name of the beach, but it was a beach where apparently this happens a lot, and maybe it happens all over Florida, I don't know. But the tide went out super far, like crazy far. Like you could see where the tide had been, you could see the ocean floor, and there's like even little sand dunes, and people are out playing on them, and no one's afraid the ocean's coming right back in. You can't even freaking see the waves. It's a couple hundred yards away. It's crazy. And I'm looking at that, and I'm like, oh my God, look how far out the tide is. Sometimes, if you equate my relationship with God as the tide of the ocean, sometimes it's like that water in Fort Lauderdale is wrapping at my toes, and I can feel God on my feet. Sometimes it's like it's way up here at my neck, even above my head. Sometimes I feel like I'm swimming in a sea of God. And sometimes the tide's just out, like that day at the beach in Fort Lauderdale. I tell you what my time in Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me in my spiritual condition, which is the gift. When I was stood in Fort Lauderdale and I couldn't see the ocean, I did not think that somebody had pulled the plug in the Atlantic Ocean. I didn't think the water was gone. I knew I couldn't see it, but I knew that it was there, and I knew something else. I knew there'd be a shift in the heavens. The moon had turned. I knew that when the moon went back in its right position, that the water would come back and the ocean would still be there, and the kids would be surfing in Fort Lauderdale again by morning. I knew that. And I know that about my relationship with God. I am no longer afraid when it feels cold and alone, although sometimes it feels cold and alone. And I no longer feel superior when I'm swimming in a sea of spirituality. I try not to let my natural spiritual arrogance that I get. You ever get that spiritual arrogance? God just loves me, right? I try not to take that too seriously either. I try to accept my human condition, that my spirituality is tidal, that it moves and shifts and it changes. And sometimes I'm plugged in, and sometimes I'm not. And God loves me enough to where it is not necessarily, although sometimes can be, but not necessarily behaviorally connected or induced. That the question of whether or not God comes into my life, and the reason why inventory is important and the steps that we take are important, is because God wants to be in my life at all times. The question is whether or not I will prepare myself to allow him to come. Will I prepare myself to allow him to come? And will I forgive myself for the things that I've done and know that God has already forgiven me for the things that I've done, so where I will let him enter the spiritual house that he created of Sheldon to allow him to come in here? And will I not be afraid when I feel alone and when the tide is out? And will I know that God is real and God is in my life and he's coming back? And this is my spiritual experience. And I tell you what is beautiful is that I know people whose that's not their experience. But we all have our own experience with God, don't we? It's a funny deal, this journey in Alcoholics Anonymous, where we're all looking for our own private, personal connection to God. It's a journey, a lonely journey that we take alone to connect with our own power. And we take it together as a group, hand in hand, never by ourselves, which is a beautiful thing.
Thanks for listening. Please support the channel by liking and subscribing.